welcome to the Doom Scroll News Report here on Radio Taiwan International, where I, Amanda Stevens, and my co-host,
Anna Belinsky,
two writers, political by necessity, cover some of the biggest international news stories dominating our feeds from the last week. I'm Amanda Stevens, and this week we're tackling defections and ideology clashes in Trump's party over the Iran war, what's happening in Cuba, and a phenomenon called the alpine divorce. But before we get to any of that, Hannah, when was the last time that you were publicly and immediately conversation checked? By which I mean you're having a conversation, you say something, and maybe you know you're lying, or maybe you're just like honestly saying what you think is true, and somebody else just pipes up and says, no, you're wrong, or corrects you.
You know, it's funny because now that you ask me this and I have to think about it, I wonder if I have surrounded myself with yes men because I really can't recall any recent incidents. Or maybe, just maybe, it's that I'm never wrong.
Which must be true.
Actually, I think the most likely answer is just that I don't rant like I used to.
But of course, I'm bringing this up because in the news.
Oh, the news.
The news. This happened to United States President Donald Trump, who claimed that
many things.
The United States was in talks with Iran to end the war. And then by the end of the day, or even before the end of the day, Iran came back and said, no, we're not. We haven't talked on how to end the war. That's not going on.
That's the thing, right? It's all about the timing. It feels like, and a lot of people suspect that it is just stock market manipulation.
Right.
And not, maybe not senility, but I mean, we're not taking that off the table.
Let's not. This is a room of possibility here, so we like to include all options. Yeah. But yeah, that is sort of how people thought because, frankly, the war is expensive in more ways than one. It's expensive
Billions
in lives lost. It's expensive in area and resources that are being spent and wasted, and of course, it is also expensive monetarily. But another way that it's been expensive, at least for Trump specifically, is that it may be costing him support. So we're going to start with this story we didn't have enough time to cover in our previous episode, but it did break last week when Trump's top counterterrorism guy, Joe Kent, resigned from his position over the Iran war. In his resignation letter, he said that Iran posed, quote, no imminent threat to the United States, unquote, and claimed the administration, quote, started the war due to pressure from Israel, unquote. He also invoked Trump's own campaign promises to end Middle East entanglements and these sort of like endless wars.
Right.
Now, I will also put this right here that Joe Kent himself is a very problematic figure for multiple reasons, including the fact that he's kind of a known adherent or subscriber to a lot of anti-Semitic ideology. The White House, of course, has done what they always do and immediately thrown him under the bus by saying not any of that, not the fact that he does subscribe to problematic ideology and ideas, but said that he was never fit for the job. He's always been a faker. This is fake news, and he's unreliable.
Typical discrediting the guy that doesn't like me anymore.
Right. Also kind of a question about if he was so unreliable and if you always knew this about him, why did you make him the top counterterrorism guy?
Many questions.
A lot of questions. But it has raised a lot of eyebrows because so far, Kent is the most high-profile figure within the administration to speak out publicly against the U.S.-Israeli attack on Iran. And he's harder to dismiss as just someone who's angry at Trump because up until this point, he's been a long-time Trump supporter, like
very
a big fan.
Loyalist. Yeah.
So I want to start by asking, do you think that this will lead to any other MAGA loyalists or known Trump loyalists to defect as this war goes on and even maybe gets more expensive?
When this news first broke, I was like a little bit excited. I thought, oh, what if it is the beginning of
an
something?
exodus?
Yeah. But then, of course, reality came crashing down on me. And I just think it's too idealistic to see it that way because I'm not that hopeful that many people can willingly deprogram themselves of this MAGA mindset. I don't think it's even about politics anymore. And it's become absorbed into people's identity because now you can straight up present someone with the facts and it's obvious that they just don't care that Trump is in the Epstein files and that he's clearly kind of senile now and that he goes back on his campaign promises. You can put all of that in front of them, and some of them will still think that he's the second coming of Christ.
I think this is literally like one of those conspiracy theories that's out there. Is that
it
exactly?
is.
Yeah.
It is. They think that he's going to bring about. I don't even care.
Where
to
you know
it.
what? I'm going to steer us in the other direction.
But
it's almost a conspiracy theory.
Yeah.
But just towards let's add more fuel to the fire of, is this ultimately going to bring about Trump's end? So after Kent resigned, myself and many other people in the news looked to Tulsi Gabbard, who is this administration's director of national intelligence, because she was a known friend of Kent and another person who was in vocal opposition to war in Iran. Literally, she sold T-shirts during the last election cycle that said "No war in Iran." The same week that within the same week that Kent resigned, Tulsi Gabbard actually was questioned by Congress, specifically on the information that the intelligence community and her department had on Iran before the war began. Now, she was questioned specifically on this line that Kent had where he said that previous to the attack, Iran posed no imminent threat to the United States. In her responses, she didn't say too much on that, despite being grilled. But she did kind of thinly veil the fact that her opinion, the intelligence community opinion, and Trump's opinion about whether Iran were or were not an imminent threat before Trump and Israel bombed them were not the same.
She's probably trying to avoid being burned at the stake.
Right. It definitely felt she did underscore that the president of the United States is the only person who's allowed to decide what's a threat and what's not a threat, and then said she checked her own opinions at the door when she joined the
coalition.
Yeah, when she joined the department, I guess.
It's not really an encouraging implication there, is it? That you have to have the same opinions as your boss,
Now, that being said, people are still reading this as signs that support internally for Trump's war is on the rocks. And not just in his immediate party. Nationally speaking, polling suggests that while MAGA and big MAGA groups are fully behind the Iran war, other large chunks of voters, including young voters, Black and Latino voters, and independents, are staunchly against the war. It is deeply unpopular, and that they are leaving the Republican Party and their support for Trump in large numbers. This is important because it was these groups of people who were credited with giving Trump the presidential win, and is relevant because it means that ultimately Trump and his party and supporters could lose the midterm elections, which are coming up this year. That means that their party could lose their congressional majority. And that means that Trump could finally face some accountability or checks on his power and his ability to wield the armed forces.
Could it be?
Like the Senate's supposed to do. Yeah. It's kind of what's supposed to be their job. Of course, when I lay it all out like this, it does kind of feel a little bit like a Rube Goldberg machine if
Everything
things going
must work
wrong.
Out just so, yeah.
Right. If this happens, then that could happen. But even so, this is an idea that people in the media sphere and the political sphere are kind of talking about, and it's starting to get some traction. Foreign wars especially are something that are far easier to criticize Trump, even publicly about, because nationally and with your voters and your constituents, it's really unpopular.
Yeah.
So, Hannah, do you think that we may actually be seeing the crumbling of Trump's support in a meaningful way, even if it's not his immediate people or his immediate circle? And how likely do you think that any of this is to affect things for Trump and his cronies later on in the year or even in the war?
So as of last Wednesday, when I was writing the news about it, gas was up about $140 a barrel. And I do think when people start to feel it in their pocketbooks, that's just about the only way to reliably move the American voter, basically, is to make them feel the pinch. And the thing is, while I don't think a MAGA voter would ever vote blue again, even if they defected from MAGA, I just don't think
there's not going to be any revenge voting.
No, I don't think so. They would probably instead just abstain from voting altogether if they felt that their guy has abandoned their interests. I mean, ultimately, we're more motivated by voting someone out, right, than we are about voting someone in.
Right. Oh, isn't that true?
Sad.
Well, I mean, this is obviously, we won't know how this plays out until it continues down the way. We know that a 15-point peace plan, as of our recording today, was recently rejected by Iran.
And the thing is, the voters' memory is so short. It really kind of depends on what happens just leading up to
a lot of
midterms.
what we're talking about here won't come to fruition until the end of the year, till around September.
Right, the fall.
September, October. So I guess we'll have to check in then, and hopefully we'll have no news about the Iran war because it will be over.
Please.
All right, so let's move on to another country that is struggling with oil. And
Aren't we all?
every country in the world, basically. Let's talk about Cuba. But I want to ask you, Hannah, as an American trapped in the American news sphere, even overseas, how often do you see Cuba in the news cycle? And this week especially.
I pretty much only see Cuba within the context of Marco Rubio hating it. Openly.
Yeah, we'll circle back to this because that a lot of times I feel like when you see Cuba, it's because there is a crisis.
Right.
Or because they're having a political spat with the United States.
Yep.
Specifically in these two instances. And those are both kind of true right now.
Yep.
So the problem is that Cuba is having an energy crisis. And when I say an energy crisis, I mean the country is like potentially on the verge of collapse because they have no energy.
It's really bad.
And as of this week, they have experienced their second countrywide, nationwide blackout, which I'll be giving a short introduction to. But I wanted to tie it back to us personally because Taiwan is actually also a country which has experienced rolling blackouts in the past, especially during times when perhaps the power grid needed maintenance. Or I think there was a period of time where we just didn't have enough power for everybody. So certain cities and areas of cities were scheduled for like 20-minute to 40-minute blackouts. What is your most recent or your worst blackout story, Hannah?
I've been lucky because it's been a long time since I've experienced a blackout exceeding like a few hours. It was back in the day when Keelung's infrastructure was not quite as good, and when a typhoon would roll through, then sometimes some power lines would go down. You know, they would need time to fix that. And it was just a lot of hanging out with the family by candlelight and my mother fanning me to help me get to sleep because, you know, there's no AC and it's hot and
that's
it's hard
so
to sleep.
sweet.
So it's really nice. It's
It's a sweet story wrapped in a blackout.
Memory of a annoying period of time.
Yeah.
So
well, I think that's relevant to my own experience is also a storm, but it was a winter storm. However, as bad as it was, I know my family was fortunate to have basically like a stove-like fireplace, and it was in a room that we could like huddle up in and basically sort of like barricade against the cold. So it was a bad time, but I don't remember it as like a crisis.
Right.
I just remember it as a very bad time. It lasted for like a week or so.
It's kind of uncomfortable.
Yeah, it was a very cold week. But that's just to give some perspective to what I'm going to describe, which is Cuba's situation, which is extremely, extremely bad.
Yeah.
Now, how we got here basically boils down to the fact that the United States, always the United States, has maintained an economic embargo on Cuba since the 1960s, which has drastically affected the country and its development.
Yep.
According to the International Energy Agency, over 80% of Cuba's energy is dependent on oil imports, specifically. Because of these embargoes, Cuba got most of its oil from Venezuela because they don't really have a lot of options.
Yeah.
But ever since the U.S. strike on Venezuela this last January, they have been unable to get the oil needed for the country to produce energy to just do daily things. So, as I said at the very beginning, it's getting to the point where the country is now on the verge of a potential collapse.
Yeah.
Mauricio Torres and Michael Rios over at CNN described some of the effects of these blackouts that have been happening, which include thousands of people being waitlisted for surgeries because the hospitals just don't have enough energy to do them.
Horrible.
Yes. Trash piling up in the streets because collection trucks cannot get gasoline to get it. And it's now affecting their water supply, their potable water supply.
Everything worse.
As of our recording on Thursday, March 26th, Cuba has experienced 2 countrywide blackouts, and the country is flailing to try to, one, get enough energy backups up, including solar panels, that the water remains potable and that doesn't disappear.
Yeah.
Also, several aid flotillas have been sent, and others are, I think, scheduled to arrive tomorrow from Mexico, kind of an international aid situation. Yeah. Of course, the situation is still developing, and the United States has teased and when I say the United States, I mean Trump specifically, has teased this friendly takeover. Whatever that means. I have no idea. At the very least, very tone deaf. But whatever it does mean, Cubans are obviously opposed to that. Now, we've talked about this kind of like energy black market almost, usually with a focus on providers of embargoed energy and oil, and with a small dose of shaming for the countries who should know better and could afford better behavior. But this is the flipped situation with a country that has had no other option but kind of this like black market energy. Right. So what is your opinion on the kind of energy blockade strategy that the United States is employing against Cuba currently?
Well, it definitely feels like America is kicking Cuba while they're already down, right? And it also feels by design, knowing, they just took out Venezuela's leader not that long ago, knowing that that was a main supplier of energy for Cuba.
That was definitely part of the calculus. That would have been in the room.
Definitely, because in their mind, it's like Cuba, our enemy, is still in our backyard, still posing a threat to us in our hemisphere, so on and so forth. And it's always fascinating to me how much, we mentioned Marco Rubio earlier, how much these Cuban Americans love to see their former country just dogpiled like this. I mean, I know a lot of them probably came from wealthy families who got when Cuba became communist, so I get it, but it is still amazing how much enmity that Americans and Cuban Americans have for their own ancestral home. And they, their hands are tied. It feels a little bit unethical.
Oh, it definitely reads as unethical to me because I can understand the anger at a government. Yeah. I can understand government to government anger. But situations like this, the people who are going to bear the brunt of what is happening are the civilians who do not have control over the situation. Right. And this is a country where people are not allowed to demonstrate publicly. Right. There are very strict laws on what you are allowed to do and what you're not allowed to do. This incident has actually sparked some public demonstrations, some of them peaceful, some of them not so peaceful, going after like government buildings.
So that's how they have nothing left.
There's no other options forward. On that end, though, Cuba has said that they are in talks with the United States. We don't know to what degree or how likely those are to come to fruition. I have heard that one of Trump specifically, his talking points is he wants the president to resign before they lift the blockade, which I don't think is going to happen.
Don't think so.
But there is a lot of like aid talk going on. There are South American and Central American aid, like big aid coalitions that are going to come to try to help this humanitarian situation. So keep your eyes peeled, keep your eyes open, and hopefully we'll have some good news. And in the meantime, we're going to end by talking about something that is a lot easier to have a very definite opinion on. All right, so we're going to end by talking about one of the craziest ways that I've ever heard to end things, period. And by things, I mean relationships. I mean breakup strategies. There is a trend. I don't want to say a new trend because, in my opinion, if it's in the news cycle, it's kind of already old. But it is being called the alpine divorce, which I found out about through a news-provided, like NPR-provided, half-comical survival guide posted by NPR.
What is this, The Onion?
So basically, it's when instead of telling somebody that it's not working out or even breaking up via text message, you take your significant other up on a hiking trail and abandon them there. Not always intentionally, sometimes maybe because your partner just doesn't wait for you and finishes the trail without you. Or maybe you have a fight and they storm off and they never come back. And then they always are followed by breakups if the breakup isn't this incident specifically.
Naturally.
Yes. The majority of these cases do seem to be men abandoning women, unfortunately. And so I showed the video to my boyfriend, and he kind of summed up my thoughts on this by quipping, "Isn't that attempted murder?" But Hannah, what do you think about this trend? And had you heard about it before I brought it up to you? I feel weird calling it a trend. I don't want it to be a trend.
But
that
it
feels
is,
like fun.
evidently.
Clearly.
Because I had just been reading in the news somewhere, I believe it was in
Austria?
Yes, where a woman died because she was abandoned by her male hiking partner, boyfriend, husband, one of the two.
Partner.
And just left out there exposed to the elements. And yeah, she died. So, which is,
it's mentioned
to me,
in the article,
negligent homicide, you know? And of course, when you think of a story like this, the worst scenario comes to mind. There are, of course, plenty of hiking trails that a single person could complete safely and be okay, you know, if you are reasonably
it's not always
fit
like the
and prepared.
catastrophic end.
Sure. There are plenty of trails right here in Taiwan where it's just a flight of stairs and you would be okay if somebody abandoned you there, you know, on Elephant Mountain.
God willing, it never happens. But that's the thing, though, because I feel like, so we did read an article about this before we came in. Obviously, we do our research out here. But the first story that is mentioned there happens in like Yosemite National Park.
Which is
and the
not
second
safe.
one definitely talks about a woman who was left at the bottom of the Grand Canyon.
You cannot be doing
which,
that.
If you've never been there, I've never been there, but it's a 12-hour hike out.
It's big. People die.
Yes, it's crazy dangerous. And so the article was trying to posit, how does this happen? Why is this a trend? How is this happening? And I didn't agree with them at first, but after reading through more of it, I do tend to agree, which is that some experts have said that the cause of these alpine divorces, as they're called, is not necessarily ill intent from the beginning, meaning these are unlikely to be premeditated and I'm going to abandon them there and leave them to die on the top of the mountain. But instead, what they called this big ego and poor communication. Basically, sort of this idea that the partners who are leaving their significant other on the mountain believe that it's not that big of a deal. They don't understand how dependent their partner is on the help, or they just don't understand how dangerous it is to be doing what they're doing. They're just, as you said, negligent, grossly negligent.
I don't think they go into the hike thinking, I'm going to leave her out here
in the middle
woods.
of nowhere. Yeah. In cougar territory.
I think probably it's one of those things, you get in a fight along the way, or you're just irritated with each other, and you just get separated. And
then you choose not to check in.
Yes. And then, God forbid, something happens. Probably in most cases it doesn't, but it's at the very least extremely scary. Sure. And it's something you can easily imagine going wrong. Just, it's one of those things.
I mean, this should be our PSA where we would say, don't do that. Also, I would say, if your relationship isn't doing well, don't do this. Yeah.
Don't go.
Don't go on a hike. Do not go camping. Do not go for a climb.
Don't trust that guy.
This is like hotboxing your issues.
Yeah.
Now, of course, I don't know. Maybe you didn't have issues before they left you on the trail.
That possible, but that would really be out of left field.
I know. Who knows? Anyway, unfortunately, we're all out of time. We're all out of time.
She's alpine divorcing me.
Right here in the middle of at the height of our fervor. I'm leaving you alone. Because that's all the time that we have for today's news report. There is a quick reminder that you can find all of our referenced articles, including the video that I mentioned, in the show notes for today's episode. I'm Amanda Stevens.
I'm Hannah Belinsky.
And thank you for joining us on air today. Tune in tomorrow for more programs by Radio Taiwan International. And in the meantime, remember to stop scrolling and touch grass. And do not leave your partner alone on that grass on a mountain in the hills.
Don't abandon me.
We'll see you next week.
Catch the latest RTI news, programs, previews, and more on our website, rti.org.tw. That's rti.org.tw.